The Simpsons is a show with God always hanging over it. Christianity and religion in general have been reliable targets of the show's satire for decades.
I've done everything the Bible says, even the stuff that contradicts the other stuff.
And the Simpsons, of course, are good, God-fearing Protestants of a very specific denomination.
The one true faith, the Western branch of American Reformed Presbylutheranism.
Now, of course, that's not a real church. It's a parody of the many, many denominations within Christianity. But remember that line, because it's part of a surprisingly positive and coherent religious philosophy that low-key celebrates not just Christianity, but all major religions as well.
Our topic will be religion, which is the one true faith.
To understand how a show that says things like this,
I'm no missionary, I don't even believe in Jebus,
could have a well-fleshed-out theological philosophy, first we should take a look at the enormous role religion plays in the characters' lives. Part 1. Are you there, God? It's me, Marge. Since the early seasons, prayer has played a pivotal role in the show.
Some philosophers believe that nobody is born with a soul, that you have to earn one through suffering and thought and prayer, like you did last night.
From Bart praying for a snow day to delay an upcoming test, to Marge praying for an end to a hurricane, to an entire episode about Homer discovering the power of prayer and using it for corrupt personal gain. And while these episodes have a pretty conventional idea of what prayer is, like you ask God for something and God gives it to you, some episodes have a more nuanced approach, like the season 26 episode, when Marge's church group takes to card counting in order to raise money for the church, which ends up with the casino kidnapping Homer and Marge praying for his safety.
Maybe we got it all wrong, praying for you to give us things we selfishly want. Maybe prayer is just taking a moment to tell yourself that there is good in the universe, and I'm going to sit here and focus on that good, and maybe, just maybe, I'll get my husband back.
And in some way or another, the prayer works. There's also the season 31 episode where Todd loses faith in God due to the death of his mother, leading Flanders to get drunk with Homer and nearly get killed in a car accident.
Are you sure you don't want to pray for your dad?
I can't pray. I don't think anyone's listening anymore.
Oh, sweetie, prayer doesn't have to be to God. It can also just be an honest conversation we have with ourselves. Just do what your heart tells you.
Honestly, it's surprisingly profound. Marge's description of prayer in these episodes could be called contemplative prayer, as opposed to older episodes' use of petitionary prayer, when a character simply asks God for something. Emphasizing this more meditative approach, I think, represents a shift in the writer's handling of Christianity, depicting it in a way that has more in common with Eastern religions, like Buddhism, which, as we'll see, becomes a recurring theme in the show. But nonetheless, in pretty much every instance of a character praying, God does in fact answer their prayers, leading to one clear conclusion in the Simpsons universe. Part 2. God is real. In the Simpsons.
My son went down to Earth once. I don't know what you people did to him, but he hasn't been the same since.
Despite the writers not necessarily being very religious themselves, God is clearly very real in the world of The Simpsons.
The show seems to often take a much more religious bent than any of us have in our personal lives, implying that God takes direct action in Homer's life.
Like in the Simpsons movie, when Grandpa receives a vision from God which accurately foreshadows events of the story. Homer has met God on more than one occasion.
I'm not a bad guy. I work hard and I love my kids. So why should I spend half my Sunday hearing about how I'm going to hell?
You've got a point there.
Now, one could easily interpret some of these scenes as just dreams or hallucinations, but in at least one instance, Homer's interactions with God in heaven lead to real-world change. Like when, after correctly predicting the end of the world, Homer asks God to undo the apocalypse to save his family, and, more importantly, revert Moe's back to a tavern, since Moe misguidedly sold the bar earlier in the episode.
Hallelujah! Hallelujah! Thank you, Lord! It's back the way it was.
Now, of course, just like in Flanders' Bible, there's contradictions. Like this scene after Homer increases his IQ.
I was working on a flat tax proposal, and I accidentally proved there's no God.
We'll just see about that. Uh-oh. Well, maybe he made a mistake. Nope.
Or in this flash-forward episode where we meet Maud's ghost.
There is no God, Nettie. It's just an empty, meaningless void.
Isn't she pretty?
But honestly, both these scenes feel much less substantive compared to everything else we've discussed here. Homer could certainly have been wrong in his calculations about God, and future episodes often are treated as non-canon. So to the extent that there's any internal consistency to this show whatsoever, I think it's safe to say that yes, in the world of The Simpsons, God is actually real. And while we know that the Abrahamic God is a real force in this universe, we've also seen a God from Apu's Hindu beliefs to be real.
Please do not call me a heathen. It offends Hanuman, the monkey-headed Lord of Winds, who believed the sun to be a ripe mango.
Homie, after all this, do you still believe in God?
On a beautiful night like tonight, how could I not?
And we've seen Buddha hanging out with God in heaven.
Now, why don't you consider other faiths for your heaven? Like, oh, I don't know, the way of the Buddha?
Which suggests there's lots of types of divinity running through the world of The Simpsons. But despite Homer's many profound experiences with the Almighty,
Save me, Jebus!
he's certainly not the most spiritual character in the show. Part 3, The Gospel of Ned versus the Gospel of Lisa. Ned Flanders and Lisa Simpson are both very religious, but in very different ways, and the ways they diverge spiritually illustrate one of the show's central religious themes. Let's start with Flanders. In the early days of the show, he was simply Homer's neighbor who had everything a little better than he did, but they eventually fleshed him out to be the Christian do-gooder we know and love. It occasionally seemed like Flanders' relative wealth and happiness compared to The Simpsons was a result of his faith.
Flanders is a regular Charlie Church, and God didn't save his house.
Especially since we've seen what an active role God plays in this universe.
Thanks, God.
Oakley dokley.
And while at first his characterization may have seemed a little flat, he has had his faith tested over and over, like when his house is destroyed by a hurricane.
With all that's happened to us today, I kind of feel like Job.
And then, of course, his wife Maud dying, and many seasons later, his second wife Edna dying. While Flanders started out as the guy with everything a little better than Homer, he evolved to become one of the most tragic characters in animation, with so many challenges and heartbreaks while somehow holding on to his faith through it all. But how did Flanders become so religious? We know he didn't get it from his beatnik parents, and while the Minnesota Spankological Protocol may have broken his bad behavior streak, it doesn't show where he got his religiosity. It wasn't until a season 30 episode, which featured God and St. Peter discussing who should be admitted into heaven, that we get a flashback as to how Flanders became a devout Christian. Basically, Ned spent some of his early adulthood as an unscrupulous trampoline salesman until, after carelessly selling a dangerous trampoline to young Homer, he saves Homer and has a near-death experience. It's here that Flanders literally meets Jesus and turns over a new leaf to become the kind-hearted, religious geek we know him to be. And given all the struggles that Flanders would eventually go through, it makes sense that he would cling so tightly to these religious beliefs. But it results in his occasional unfortunate tendency of being close-minded about other religions.
Tell Mr. Ned to stop trying to convert me.
I was just telling him how brave he is to worship a false god.
Which becomes all the more apparent when contrasted against the other most spiritual character, Lisa. Lisa has had an interesting arc over the course of the series. In early episodes, she has a very basic understanding of religious right versus wrong.
Thou shalt not steal!
But as she grew as a character, her relationship with religion morphed as well, leading her to eventually find her family's faith to be in conflict with her own scientific views.
I just find it hard to believe there's a dead angel hanging in our garage.
Like in a season 17 episode where Springfield begins teaching creationism in school. The courtroom battle that ensues pits Lisa's more secular views against Flanders' fundamentalist streak, with the end result being that, while the two of them may disagree, they ultimately are able to respect each other's beliefs.
I want you to know I respect your beliefs and I can see how deeply you feel about them. I just don't think religion should be taught in our schools any more than you'd want scientists teaching at the church.
Well, I wish this world would evolve a few more kids like you, Lisa.
It's in this era of Lisa's evolution that we really start to see this theme of religious tolerance shine through, as a few seasons earlier, she resolved another religious conflict. It's in season 13, after the Simpsons church becomes a corporate megachurch, Lisa officially abandons Christianity and converts to Buddhism. And while she actually does remain a Buddhist beyond this episode, she resolves that her new religious beliefs can still be compatible with her family's.
Buddhists respect the diversity of other religions, as long as they're based on love and compassion.
What?
It's true. So why don't you go home? I'm sure your family really misses you.
I can really celebrate Christmas?
You can celebrate any holiday.
Which leads us to the through line of this whole video, and the show's overall approach to Christianity and religion in general. Part 4, Religious Pluralism. Way back in season 4, when Homer stopped going to church, the show was already preaching this gospel of religious coexistence. After Flanders and the Springfield Fire Department save Homer's life, Homer learns that the community found in religion, regardless of the specific faith or denomination, is what saved him from a fiery death.
Homer, God didn't set your house on fire.
No, but he was working in the hearts of your friends and neighbors when they went to your aid, be they Christian, Jew, or
Miscellaneous.
Hindu. There are 700 million of us.
Oh, that's super.
Was this positive religious moment the intended takeaway of the episode? Maybe not exactly.
I read that several ministers and theologians praised this show, and when I heard that, I felt that I had failed.
But the fact remains that despite Homer's and the writers' criticisms of religion, the episode portrayed religious people in a nuanced and ultimately positive light. And as we've seen, this theme of religious tolerance returns again and again throughout the show. In a season 16 episode, Bart starts going to Catholic school, leading him and Homer to convert to Catholicism. And after Flanders and Reverend Lovejoy fight to bring the two of them back to the Presbylutheran church, Bart has this revelation.
Don't you get it? It's all Christianity, people. The little stupid differences are nothing next to the big stupid similarities.
Which, quite hilariously, leads to religious warfare centuries in the future between religious sects battling over the meaning of Bart's message. This is where the irony of the bizarrely specific name of the Simpsons' religious denomination becomes so apparent.
I don't think this is what Martin Presbylutheran had in mind when he founded our religion by sticking his 3 suggestions under the Pope's windshield wiper.
The show making fun of the many, many divisions within Christianity is a perfect reflection of the show's overall message of religious unity. The tolerance message comes up again in a season 21 episode where the family goes on a pilgrimage to Israel, and Homer, after wandering into the desert and hallucinating, returns to the group thinking himself a religious prophet.
Christians, Muslims, and Jews, I have come to gather you into a new faith. From now on, you shall be called Chrismu-Jews. Because when you get down to it, aren't all religions the same? They tell you what to eat, when to pray, how this imperfect clay that we call man can mold itself to resemble the divine. But we can never attain that ultimate grace while there is hatred in our hearts for each other.
I think these ideas could best be described under the umbrella of perennialism, which is the view that there is a shared core of truth in all major religions.
Have you thought about one of the other major religions? They're all pretty much the same.
This type of philosophy seems to be the underpinning of so much of the show's handling of religion. There's even a scene in season 33 that could be read as an explanation as to the existence of so many deities within the show's universe, when the Simpsons encounter a being who identifies himself then as the Norse god Loki.
I am Loki, god of mischief. But I am known by many names and take many forms.
Now this scene is a little out there, but if you take it at face value, it seems to be suggesting that all these different spiritual entities we've seen are just different forms of one divine being, which sounds kinda like perennial philosophy. Admittedly, that one may be a stretch. But if you think I'm cherry-picking different jokes to support this theory of religious unity, I'm really not, because the show has gotten very explicit about this message over the years. In a 2-part season 31 episode, Springfield's church gets a new pastor, appropriately named Bodhi.
I love Buddha. That's where I got my name, the Bodhi tree.
Who spends a considerable chunk of the episode simply preaching, basically this exact philosophy.
I think so many of us have made a God that's like us, instead of the other way around. God loves diversity. God didn't just make one type of flower, he made thousands of different flowers. Roses, lilies, orchids, and he made the weeds too. But he loves all of them indiscriminately. The original function of religion was to bring us together. I want to bring us all together. Not just Christians, but Hindus and Buddhists, even those that don't believe.
Honestly, it's kind of bizarre. It basically uses several lengthy scenes to deliver a long, if progressive, religious sermon. It's not a bad 2-parter. It really feels like a distillation of the philosophy that the show had been trending towards for years. The story even continues the religious journeys of Lisa and Flanders, with Lisa becoming enraptured by Bodhi's message of unity and embracing Christianity in a way she hadn't done since becoming a Buddhist.
I've got Buddha, I've got science, and now Jesus makes 3.
Flanders, however, rejects Bodhi's views. In this episode, he's once again used to represent a more conservative Christianity that the writers seem to be criticizing, while Lisa represents the show's preferred, more pluralistic version of Christianity. It's worth noting, of course, that this episode isn't actually written by one of the usual writers. It was guest written by comedian Pete Holmes. So while presumably this message is informed by his beliefs, The Simpsons still gave him not 1, but 2 episodes to share his theological views in. So clearly the writers found his ideas pretty compatible with the show's worldview. But if you need yet another example, at the end of that episode with God and St. Peter discussing admittance into heaven, they ultimately rule that people of all faiths and atheists who live a good life belong in the afterlife.
There are many paths to heaven.
Maybe we should let everybody in.
Great idea.
This scene is obviously very Christian-centric, but it sums up the show's religious portrayal pretty well, that all religious beliefs are valid, and all lead to some kind of salvation.
Homer, that's not God. That's just a waffle that Bart tossed up there.
So, despite itself, the show that's done so much to lampoon religious institutions over the years,
Sacrilicious.
ultimately does have a surprisingly positive message on religion.
This is heaven.
So what do you think? What other big religious themes does The Simpsons dive into? Let me know in the comments. If you liked this video, be sure to like and subscribe. And always remember,
Praise Jebus.